There are 100 people on death row in the state of Pennsylvania. This is part 7 of the series. Jerry Chambers, 18 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania convicted Chambers to death for the murder of a 3-year-old girl. He allegedly lost his temper when he observed the 3-year-old witnessing him having relations with her aunt, according to court filings. Chambers killed the young girl by throwing her into a radiator. Subsequent evidence revealed that Jerry Chambers had abused and beaten the home's children. The infant was discovered by the cops face up on a sofa. The EMTs tried to revive her even though they knew she had been dead for a while. She was later officially declared deceased when she got to the hospital. John Ainger, 18 years on death row. John Charles Ainger drove to the Greaves house early on March 25, 2005. He threatened to kill Heather Greaves, according to what he told the police, unless she broke up with her most recent lover. In order for Heather to be prepared for him at her house that day, Ainger set up a meeting with her. Before moving to a store close to his house, he worked with Heather Greaves at an Acme market in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. According to a police affidavit, Heather Greaves told a neighbor that she was anticipating Ainger to drop by with flowers for her approaching birthday, but she simply saw him as a friend and wasn't interested in the love relationship he was looking for. Ainger hid a big knife and rubber gloves under his sweat jacket, carrying them both in his belt. He went to talk to Heather inside the house. Following a disagreement, he took out his knife and repeatedly stabbed her in the stomach. Since he had heard in movies and books that it was easier to puncture organs in that area than through the chest, where it is more difficult because of hitting bone, Ainger acknowledged that he intentionally stabbed Heather in the stomach. 3-year-old Avery, Heather's daughter, was present in the room when the stabbing occurred. Ainger moved away from Heather and stabbed Avery in the neck as the mother begged the child to call 911. Avery fled down the corridor, but then she fell. Ainger pursued her and saw Heather's sister Lisa emerge from the restroom. Lisa attempted to flee by running back into the restroom and closing the door, but Ainger was too strong for her. He repeatedly stabbed her in the stomach. He then stabbed Avery in the back again before turning to go to the kitchen where Heather lay dying. He pinned her to the ground after stabbing her so violently that the blade protruded from her chest. Ainger cut Heather's throat and stabbed her in the diaphragm. When he went to wash his hands at the sink, he saw that he had a cut. In order to keep his blood from being left at the murder scene, he put on one of the rubber gloves. To confuse the police, Ainger sliced open Lisa's clothing before departing, giving the impression that she had been the object of a rampage. Later that day, Heather and Lisa's father discovered the bodies. Ainger also admitted to killing Jennifer Still on July 6, 1999, using the same knife that was used in the Greaves' killings. Jennifer also rejected him, choosing to stay with the fiancé she already had. Darian Hower, 18 years on death row. While executing a warrant for Darian Hower on March 19, 2004, Sergeant Joseph Leclerc was shot and he died. Leclerc and 2 other police officers were shot by Hower, according to the authorities. Though the 2 made it through, Leclerc passed away shortly after. Andre Staten, 17 years on death row. Andre Staten emotionally and physically abused Beverly Yon when they were in an intimate relationship. Yon and her 2 sons moved in with Yon's mother, Penny Lance, as a result of the violence. She told police that Staten had hit her in January 2004. On January 27, 2004, a temporary protection from abuse order was imposed against Staten. On February 19th, the trial court issued a final PFA order after a hearing. A few days later, on February 24, 2004, Staten confided in the bartender about his frustration with his girlfriend and how he had seen her through the window the previous evening. He added that he handed her a sizable sum of money for a house he was unable to maintain, but he promised to take care of the situation as soon as possible. The following morning, Staten was spotted inside a parked automobile around a block and a half from Yon's mother's house. When Justin, Yon's son, was outside the house, he noticed Andre Staten running up to the back porch and signaling for Justin to keep quiet with a finger to his lips. Staten went inside the kitchen by kicking in the door. He took out a knife from his jacket while Yon's son, Jeremy, was there in the room. He proceeded to stab Yon till she collapsed to the ground and the big knife was still embedded in her back. After that, Staten left out the back door and ran into Justin outside, who was prepared to leave for school in his car. After throwing Justin out of the car, Staten took off driving. Later that day, Yon's injuries claimed her life. Junius Buu, 17 years on death row. On April 13, 2003, Carlos Huarbe and Oscar Rosado were shot and killed by two individuals who broke into an apartment in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Following an investigation, Terence Betia was subsequently taken into custody by the Allentown police for the killings. Betia soon after accused Buu of being involved in the shootings. Buu turned himself in to the police on September 12, 2003, and he was immediately taken into custody. Buu chose not to discuss the killings with the police in the absence of legal representation. Buu hired Glennis Clark. In the weeks that followed, Buu gave the police several admissions of guilt over the killings. He intended to rob the two guys, but when they objected, he shot and murdered them both. Miguel Padia, 17 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania condemned Padilla to death for a shooting that claimed the lives of three individuals. Miguel Padilla was unhappy that he had been turned away from an after-hours club according to court documents, so he returned later with a gun and shot the owner, a bouncer, and the customer to death. Anthony James Dick, 15 years on death row. Dick shot his wife first before shooting the two sleeping kids when they were staying at a nearby motel. The children did not survive the attack, but his wife did. In early 2006, he entered a guilty plea to the murders of his 18-month-old son and his 4-year-old stepson while they slept at the Stonecastle Motel. In addition, he entered a guilty plea to charges of attempted murder and aggravated assault on Betty, his wife, who was 23 years old at the time. The bodies of the two children were discovered on the ground, covered by blankets. Mrs. Dick made her way to a motel room nearby, where she called for help with another lodger. Dante Thomas, 16 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania sentenced Thomas to death for the murder of a witness. A man who was scheduled to testify against Thomas's friend, who was being suspected of murder, was shot and killed by Dante Thomas, according to court filings. Patrick Jason Stoller, 16 years on death row. On May 30, 2003, Patrick Stoller was a day laborer for a landscaping business at Gene Heck's opulent Upper St. Clair residence. He missed work the following several days, scoping it out and formulating his plans to loot and kill Mrs. Heck before going back there by himself on June 4th. He broke into the residence, murdered the 78-year-old widow, and robbed her house and handbag. He then made multiple fruitless attempts to cash counterfeit checks at a nearby bank. Cletus Rivera, 15 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania sentenced him to death for the murder of a police officer. On August 6, 2006, Rivera shot and killed reading police officer Scott Wirtz, according to court filings. As part of an undercover auto theft duty, Wirtz, who was 40 years old, and Officer Malcolm Ainger overheard reports over the police radio that gunfire was occurring in a parking lot near City Hall at 8th and Walnut Streets. Ainger claimed that after spotting Cletus Rivera with a rifle, he and Wirtz pursued him. According to Ainger, Rivera shot Wirtz in the buttocks and in his chest. Jeffrey Robert Martin, 15 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania condemned Martin to death for the essay and killing of 12-year-old Gabrielle Bacon. Jeffrey Martin abducted, molested, and killed a girl whose body was discovered 5 days later. Martin says he did not kill her. He claims a man offered him $100 to assist in burying the body and an ATV. During the hearing, Martin's daughter testified that when she was 6 years old, her father had abused her. Abraham Sanchez, 15 years on death row. The state of Pennsylvania sentenced Sanchez to death for robbery murder. Ray Dinarin was killed by Abraham Sanchez, according to court records, following a failed robbery attempt at the victim's residence. While searching for a house to break into, Sanchez and his 3 pals drove past a remote house with a light on and the victim seated at a table. One of the defendants, Lorenzo Shriver, rang the doorbell as Sanchez and 2 others hid in the bushes. When Diener answered, Shriver informed him that his car had broken down, so the victim proceeded to retrieve his phone. He came back and gave it to Shriver. Emerging from the shadows, Sanchez held Diener at gunpoint and told him to get down. He wrestled with Sanchez for the gun, but he suffered a hip fracture after Sanchez fired a shot that struck him in his thighs. Dinner collapsed to the floor, screaming for help. He was shot in the chest by Sanchez as he retreated. The victim was injured in the neck and shoulder by Sanchez's third round. He died while the robbers fled the scene. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.